What's good, fam? Super excited to introduce our next guest to the Cheat Code Corner. Now, this person she has more than 15 years of excellence in sales and media. She specializes in helping organizations and agencies to better understand their audience, who they want to target, and execute media and traditional and digital marketing campaigns. Now, fun fact for this person, she has hit target at virtually every organization she's been at, so she has a track record of success. Let's welcome Alison Posada to the Cheat Code Corner. So Alison, tell me, I'm very curious, like what made you decide to join the podcast?
Well, your posts were very interesting to me, but then on top of it, I think I've mentioned before, I'm really involved in a lot of different like sales groups and training and mentoring of not just women, but kind of younger and like up and coming professionals. My end goal in life is actually to be a professor and to teach sales and marketing. So just being able to educate and, talk about the industry and where it started and where it's going is a passion of mine.
Awesome. And so when is this, I don't want to sidetrack, but I'm curious, when is this, the professor role going to end up happening? Because like you're still in the mix right now.
Yes, I'm still in the mix. So I started my master's quite a few years ago, actually, before my daughter, because you have to at least have your master's, if not your doctorate.
Okay.
And then I got married, got pregnant, so kind of put that on hold. It's like my 5-year plan. Okay. I want to finish my education by mid-40s, and then I don't see myself ever being the type of person to retire. So being a professor is my retirement plan.
Got it. So you already have it mapped out then. I love it. 5-year plan. You already know where you're going to go.
No vision board or anything crazy like that, but I have a mental plan. So
I need a vision board, right? I've been telling me about them and they say that they're very inspiring because like right now I just make my lists. I just make my 1-2 year plan, but I need something that's a little bit more, I don't know, just a little bit more inspiring, I guess.
Well, you got to be crafty. If you've ever seen a vision board, it's just not in my like wheelhouse. I'm not capable of it. I would have to hire somebody to build my vision board. And I think that defeats the purpose. So
got it. Yeah. No, I hear you. Do you do sticky notes then? Or what do you do to kind of to inspire you? Like whether you have to hit a target, hit a goal, what do you do?
I am sticky notes, motivational quotes. If you could see behind my computer, I have advice from a sea turtle. 30 days of mindfulness. So I actually have an old school calendar that I like jot down things on. I like to have everything in front of me, a very visual person.
Okay, wait, hold on. So a visual person who doesn't like to create visual boards, did I catch that?
Yes, I am not crafty. Got it. If someone built it for me and put it in front of me, it would motivate me. But yes, me and glue guns don't get along, and vision boards are very like intricate with maps and yarn and stuff. So
all right, that's fair. So a little bit earlier you talked about like your 5-year plan and kind of where you're going and where you're going to end up. I'm curious to know, how did you get into sales?
Yeah, so great question and a funny story. I actually went to school I started off wanting to be a lawyer. I knew I had the gift of conversation, I guess we'll say, or negotiation. And then I started moving away, ethical reasons, stuff like that. And I started looking at broadcast. So my plan was to be a broadcast journalist.
Okay.
And that was literally what I graduated from college thinking I was going to do. And my small town, I went to a very small little mountain town in Colorado. They didn't have a television station, but they did have a radio station. So I went to interview to be on-air broadcaster, to be talent, essentially. And in the middle of my interview, the guy who's Tom Little, actually is his name, he stopped me and was like, "You're interviewing for the wrong job." I'm sorry, what? Like, you called me, I'm here, resume in hand. What are you talking about? He's like, "You're sales, and I'd like to introduce you to our sales manager." So he walked me down the hall and was like, "Meet Kim. She's our sales manager. I think you'd be great in radio sales, advertising sales." And it's been history since then.
So they were somehow able to convince you to pivot from wanting to be on-air talent to saying, "Nah, like you're gonna just jump into the sales." So I mean, I'm different roles, right? So I mean, what made you kind of stay in that role or test it out versus kind of pivoting to your initial thing of what you want to do in terms of talent?
Yeah. So at the time, I had limited options. It was a small town, so it was that or go back to bartending, which I told myself the money's great, but you're not doing that. You have to start working towards what your degree is in. And then the woman, Kim, she's actually still the sales manager there to this day. She was just great. She was my first mentor and really told me like, hey, you can make a lot of money. It's a lot of fun. You get to be involved in the promotions. You're still with the on-air talent. It's the family. Yep. And she sold me on the job of being in sales.
Yeah, that's what we do. Although I would argue, in sales, a lot of times people think it's like, oh, you're convincing people to buy stuff and this and that. I'm like, no, I don't. Like, I don't convince anybody to do anything. They already are in market or are planning to buy, and I just give them the knowledge to make a better decision, and usually it just ends up in our favor. But I don't think I convince anybody to do anything, really. I mean, what's your take on it? Do you feel like you have magic powers of influence, or what do you think is kind of your secret sauce in terms of your ability to sell?
No, that's a great question, and I'm right there with you. I know I don't sell anybody. It's just I'm not a pushy person. It's not in my nature. I like to say I'm a consultant, or I provide options. I educate them on which I think is better. And secret sauce that has always worked for me is to give them an out, let them know like, hey, if this isn't a good fit, no hard feelings. I want this to make sense for you. And as soon as you do that, you bring someone to a different level of comfort, and they're more willing to continue to ask questions, continue to lean in, and to know that they can walk away. I mean, that's one of the most powerful, the power of no. And to enable them to have that, I think is a great way to make someone feel comfortable with, the negotiations that you're having.
That is a huge thing that I'm actually going to go back to in terms of tactics and things that people are able to leverage from a sales perspective, because that is definitely a big one. And I didn't learn that one until I was 10 years, almost 10 years in. But it sounds like that's something you've been using for a while, which is awesome. I'm curious too. So, within sales, I mean, there's a lot of different types of sellers. There's a lot of different types of roles, like I have some friends who they may have one account and they have to go really deep within that particular account. Then I have folks that do maybe a little bit more transactional sales where, they're kind of cranking out a new sell maybe every month or 2 months, or maybe they have a huge, large book of business. I'd love to know in terms of where you're at today, like what type of selling do you do, and what does like your book of business look like?
Yeah, so I've done all of that. As of today, it's a small to medium size book of business of very large accounts. So Fortune 500 brands, or what we call holding company agencies, which are advertising agencies that have, children, sister, whatever you want to call them, sub agencies underneath them. So I've done the transactional, I've done the account management where you're just working with, like, let's say McDonald's, and you have to that's more like the marketing and advertising side. And now it's anybody with a certain revenue potential of, X amount or above is who I work with.
So you mentioned a little bit too, which is kind of interesting. I've always been fascinated with people's journeys, not just in how they got into sales, but like what were the stops that they had in between from then to like now, where you're really successful, you have great clients, you're killing it. And you mentioned a little bit, you said, hey, I did all of that in between, right? And I would love to know, tell us a little bit about some of the stopovers between when you first started at that little radio show all the way up to like now. What are some of the stops that you did, and what are some of the types of things that you sold?
Yeah, I've had some stops, let me tell you. So for the majority of my career, it's always been media. So radio, television, both traditional and digital.
Got it.
That's my career. That's my passion. So I started in the small radio station, which then led me to Clear Channel. So Clear Channel, we now know as iHeartMedia. And I worked for them many different years in many different markets. So Denver, Chicago, and San Diego, all three of those markets. Nice. I was a part of iHeart. Fox 5 television, but there's always those times where they can't meet the salary requirements that you have, or there's just no job openings. And it's always seemed to happen to me in times of my life when I'm like needed the most. So I've had to figure out how to pivot and overcome that. But one was when I moved to Chicago, shortly while I was working at iHeart, a client actually approached me and was like, hey, we want you to come on and do in-house marketing for us. I was like on cloud nine because now I get to do the creative side of things. And I'm not just selling, but I'm helping establish a brand. And I was very excited about it. Shortly after I gave my notice, they rescinded their offer.
Oh,
Yeah, they just didn't have the budget that they thought they did. The business actually, company actually ended up going under.
sheesh.
But I didn't want to go back to Clear Channel with my tail between my legs. So I was like, what am I going to do? And I hired a headhunter who very quickly got me a job selling air filters
Air filters.
to the industrial buildings of Chicago. So I'm climbing up ladders to the top of high rises in Chicago to talk about HEPA filters. And I was miserable. So
Air filters. That's crazy. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, is that like the HVAC world? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's what's in the very top of the building so that you can breathe clearly and not, get pollutants and allergens and all that into. The only thing I remember is that HEPA filters are better for moisture. That's like literally the one thing I walked away with after almost a year of doing that. So that was a stop in sales that I could say was transactional and not my passion. And one of the quickest ways to feel like a salesperson is to try to sell something you're not passionate about.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. That's facts. Big facts, actually. So you said something interesting too about that. I love that you mentioned about when you're doing certain roles that, you figure out what you're good at, where your strengths are. And I always love kind of figuring out, or at least asking a lot of my the guests about their superpowers and strengths. And so I'd love to know first is, what do you think makes a good or successful salesperson, or let's say a great salesperson? That's the first question. And then I'd love to know what your superpower is.
Yeah, I'm going to give away my secret sauce now.
Yeah.
I think a great salesperson, you have to have energy, obviously, and thick skin. Yeah. People don't realize how much it does beat you down to get the nose over and over and over again. And then the industry drops, there's been times you're just out of inventory and you can't fulfill a sale, and it takes a toll on you.
Yep.
And then the other thing is to realize it is very much about relationships and making someone feel comfortable with you. So that's my superpower. I don't have many clients that haven't become friends. And I don't think I've really sold to anybody who would say that they had a bad experience with me or felt, just like they were pushed into something. I take the time to really find common ground, to understand kids' birthdays, anniversaries. What do you do for fun? You always need to take that step back and get to know the person on the other end, whether it be the phone, the computer, or you're sitting down having coffee. So I know a lot. I probably know my clients more than I do some of my closest friends, which is crazy to say, but they become my closest friends.
So that's kind of interesting about, the relationship building. And we hear, people talk about relationship building, but the way you describe it in terms of the depth of the relationship that you have and understanding, the birthdays and things that, the ways of communication that your clients like to communicate. But I'd love to understand too, what are some of the things that you've done to really dive deep into the relationships? Because I don't think there's enough often tactical information where people actually really understand what it takes. So for example, I had a guest of mine, or a friend of mine rather, she creates the craziest org charts that I've ever seen, that have like the people, it has like folks that are, in administration all throughout the organization, but then she has birthdays, the partners' names, the interests. So now she does that, and she does really fantastic with that. But I'm curious to know, what are some of the things that you've done in order to kind of really manage the relationship, just from like a logistics standpoint?
Yeah. First off, I'd like to hire her to build my vision board.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. I'm not that like tactical, and really my organization skills aren't that much, but what I do is check in even when there's not a reason. So a lot of times salespeople, if it's not a renewal is not coming up, or there's not a new product or release or a reason to reach out for a sale, you don't hear from them. And I don't do that. I like to at least touch base twice a month and just be like, hey, how's it going? And I'll even sometimes be like, want to grab coffee, not to talk shop. Like, just let me know. Did your kids go back to school? Or did you get a new puppy? Like, what's going on in your life? Yeah. And at first, people will go dark because they're like, what is this email? Dismiss. Don't have time for this.
Right.
But if you find consistency, that's when you create that friendship, and they know that, hey, I'm going to hear from Alison, not because she wants to sell me, but just because we do now have this connection, and it's a give and take. And that's also what, our industry, being in sales, you could wake up tomorrow and get a new opportunity. And usually, especially if you're in an industry like mine, people cross paths over and over and over again. So you want to have that like friendly referral opportunity too.
Do you find that one of the benefits though of, not really benefits, one of the things that I have noticed is that when you stay within the industry long enough, I mean, you do end up getting referrals. Some of the names and relationships end up being the same. And so one of the kind of, I guess, cheat codes that I've figured out is now I understand why, if somebody works in transportation, they'll work at FedEx, then they'll go to UPS, then, they'll go to DHL or Amazon, because, a lot of the clients are the same, the needs are the same, the use cases are the same. So it becomes easier to really develop a network within that. And I was curious to know if you found, you being in media for a while, if that's something that you've noticed yourself, or if that's something where you more or less have had to just really grind it out in terms of finding new relationships.
No, absolutely. Very much people, especially with advertising agencies, because people will grow out of certain roles. Maybe they started in a small shop, now they're in a big agency, or they started in production and now they're in buying. So absolutely. I mean, my LinkedIn, I still see people that I worked with in Denver, 15 years ago, and they're now in Chicago, like running an entire shop. So 100%. And the same thing with the sellers too. You'll see someone was at iHeart and now they're, local media or whatever it might be. A lot of people trade off the media types and the groups as well.
Got it. So we talked a little bit about like strengths, which you mentioned about the importance of having a lot of energy, thick skin, which I think is actually underrated. Because I calculate that salespeople here know anywhere from 100 to 200 times per day, whether it's through the emails that we send and people will ghost us or not respond, or you just trying to do check-in calls and people don't respond. So I think we hear a lot of no's, and I think developing a thick skin is important, as well as like how you build relationships and whatever your superpower is. So I mean, I think the strengths that people lean into are really critical, and being able to identify those. But I also think it's good to figure out some of like the weaknesses or areas where sometimes, maybe it's not a good fit for a seller. And so I was curious, within your experience, what do you think are some of the red flags, or I guess weaknesses that sellers need to be mindful about that maybe not makes them a good fit for it?
Yeah. So actually it was my last role before where I currently am. It was training. So they flew us all out to Chicago to train us and do like team building and stuff. And a woman that got hired for the same role that I was at, just at a different market, we grabbed a glass of wine the night before our first training. And she said to me, hey, do you think we're going to have to do role playing, which is a number one tool used in sales training? Like, yes, pretty sure that they're going to have us mock sell something.
Right.
And I said that to her. I was like, yeah, I haven't done a single sales training that hasn't required some sort of like mock, selling situation. And I saw like she got flushed. And was like, I don't do well with that. And so I'm just like, flag. If you can, that's a red flag. Like if you can't pretend to sell the product to a colleague, how are you going to actually sell a product to a client? And so I actually thought about that, kept it top of mind. And it was only a matter of months before I heard that she had moved on.
Yeah.
So, if you get anxious, if you're nervous, if you really, really are concerned about what the other person's going to think, I mean, we all are, we're human. Yep. But if you allow that to distract you and make you fumble, make you not able to communicate and have conversations, sales probably isn't the right place for you.
Yeah.
And some of those people that are the best, like support, staff for sales.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you hit on the head, like there's very nuanced things, right? So like some people could be like, hey, I can learn what a product does.
Right.
I can know all the features. I can know the competitive intel, but then they seize up, right? When there's a call, or like when they have to pivot on a call and things. And that is, I mean, maybe some of it's innate, but I also think, I mean, some of it is also just reps, like getting more reps,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting.
And it happens to me. It sneaks up on me. Sometimes I go into a meeting and I feel great. And like midway through, my nerves have gotten up and I can't even tell you why.
Yeah.
It's just a feeling, a sudden thing, but you have to be able to shake it off and keep going.
I mean, I think I get nervous on every call
Yeah.
still. You know what I'm saying? Like not so much like, nervous to the point where I can't perform, but I still, I mean, the thing is like I had a call the other day with somebody, a member of my team. And of course we did prep for the call. I mean, that's not really a problem. But like I noticed over the course of like 24, 48 hours, more and more people were added to the call.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And he didn't know, like we didn't really know who was being added, but like, when you see extra all those added, and we ended up, we had some C-suite folks there, then we had folks on the sales function, then we had folks on the marketing function. And so yeah, like it wasn't so much the amount of people on the call, which was about 8. It was so much so that it was a little bit difficult to be able to like know how to necessarily prep, because like you have your plan on what you want to cover, but as we both know, when you're on a call like that, you end up having to just deal with, what matters most to the person who's most in charge usually.
Oh yeah, I've had owners walk in, an owner of an agency walk in on what we call lunch and learn, where we're teaching the
Yeah.
strategy team about our product.
Yep.
And just start hammering questions
Yeah.
that I like wasn't prepared for. I mean, this guy stuck his feet up on the table and was like, "Well, tell me about this
Right.
and this."
Right.
Like, can you just eat a sandwich and?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
one of the funny things about that is, so whenever, and here's the thing, one of the things that I learned is like this turned back into discovery mode. So anytime, someone throws, I always address, I'll always recognize and validate when somebody jumps in and says, hey, well, what about this? And I say, hey, okay, no problem. I'll make sure to address that. I'm curious what drives that question? What
Yeah.
makes you ask that question? What are you trying to get out of it? What's the outcome that you're trying to, or what are you trying to better understand? I ask a few of those to kind of calm it down and then allow me to think about it. And then I usually kind of give, whatever direct answer I can based on the information I have at hand.
I love that. Yeah. Why? Like, why is a big thing to be like, well, why are you asking? Why do you need to know this? Or why do you want to do this? Is my thing always, because people are like, can I do this with your product? It's like, well, why do you want to do that?
Yeah. 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 Do you find, how long did it take for you to be able to develop the open-ended question skill? So that like, because I'm pretty sure right now, like you can ask probably 20 open-ended questions right now about whatever. And I'm curious to know, how long did it take for you to develop that skill?
I feel like I always had the skill, but I needed to learn to tap into it.
Okay.
So
What do you mean by that?
I've been told that I know how to like lead a conversation to the end result that I want, not just professionally. I've had my boyfriend tell me that on several occasions, but I never knew it was like a skill, to ask that question like, well, so if I could provide blah, 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 is this something you could see yourself using? And if so, why? Like to add those little extra pieces.
Yep. Yep.
That came from probably the first like 5 years of, sales training, Clear Channel / iHeart every year when budget and the timing allowed would send people out for like 3 or 4 days of training.
Wow. Okay.
And I realized I was good at it. I had it in me, but they're the ones who actually taught us like use it.
Yep.
Those questions that you would ask your friend, your family, whoever, use those in sales. And probably about 5 years to make it a habit and not just something that came, was like, oh, cool, I did that.
Yeah. Okay. So formalized training. And then from there, have you ever, I mean, even now I'm curious, do you still do prep well, I'm sure you do prep on your calls, but do you write down any questions still like that you want to make sure to cover on calls on like a notebook or things, or do you pretty much have them mostly off the dome?
No, I still definitely write stuff down. I still do a lot of research. So on the person, but mainly on the business, pull up their website, figure out if they just won an award, look and see if they just released a new product. And I find a way that my questions can tie back into something that's relevant about them, because people love to talk about themselves. And especially if it's, a brand and it's their baby, even more so. So I'll write a lot of questions that remind me of something I saw that I think in my research that could be very helpful.
How long, and I know it ranges, but I'm just trying to get a slightly tactical. When you're doing prep for a call, let's just call it, whether it's a discovery call or even like a strategy call, generally speaking, how much time on average per client, an average size client, how much time do you spend prep for that call?
Like 30 minutes, honestly. Yeah. It doesn't have to be that long. Now, if I'm going to an entire team and there's a very like specific agenda, obviously I'll spend a few hours.
Yeah,
But
of course.
like just a quick discovery call, like 30 minutes. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes we'll just have the website pulled up on a second screen.
got it. I mean, 30, I mean, here's the thing, 30 minutes is a lot. Like if given you know how to do the research, right? It's not like this is your first rodeo. So you know, okay, I'm going to do the website, maybe the four, you know, the 10K or annual report, or I'm going to check Google News. So, I mean, you're doing, you know, 30 minutes of efficient research, I think is a lot, you know?
Yeah. Well, you get stuck, you know, if again, if you're passionate or interested in it, all of a sudden you're like, well, that's cool. And now you're on their Facebook page,
Yep.
which is another level of stalking, but all helpful.
Oh, cool. No, this is super helpful because you know I always oftentimes, especially when I'm dealing talking with sales folks, I love to better understand, you know, what are the things that they've done to actually reach where they got into. And you know, you talked a lot about your journey in terms of, you know, you've had a lot of different sales roles in your journey. You've had transactional, you've had more consultative sales, and then you know you've had 5+ years of formalized training that you had to really work at, and to kind of like really build up where you're at. And so I think that that's really powerful because people need to understand like this type of stuff does not happen overnight. I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort and energy to do it. And so, you know, I really appreciate you starting to share some of that, you know, just that insight. And now let's talk about some fun stuff. I'd love to understand. I mean, what would you say is something from like a sales perspective, or what is the biggest thing that you bought for yourself with some like one of your commission checks?
I felt I'm like kind of like, okay, do I say this? Yes, I do. Big investment property in Mammoth, California. So
Oh,
yeah.
very nice.
But we'll back it up to like in my mid 20s when I moved to Chicago. I was walking by the Guest store on Magnificent Mile, and there was a white peacoat, and it was gorgeous. And I literally looked in the window and said, "My first commission check, I'm coming back and buying that coat." So that's the memory that probably sticks out to me the most because it was like a
Mm.
conscious thing. The investment property was not a commission check; it was saving from commission
Yes,
checks.
yes,
And
yes.
I'm a big snowboarder, and I just was tired of paying for hotels and Airbnbs. So yeah, that
Well,
was
that's
a very
awesome.
set goal, but yeah.
That's what a life in sales can do. But you know, I really love that story about the pea coat, right? 'Cause I'll tell a personal story. These little diamonds that I got them when I was 18. This after I graduated from high school. I worked all summer at the movie theater, and we got commission. We used to get 6% of our sales. So you know, I was making $6 an hour, but then I was making, you know, like an extra 30 or 40 bucks each day on it. So
That's a cool movie theater
yeah,
selling tickets and
yeah, it was years ago, but I worked in the concession stand, so you had to like really work, you know, like these were so anyway, like it was something where, you know, I wanted these forever. And so these are the things that I like when I think about my big most significant gifts for myself. I think about these. Like, yeah, I've gotten other
yeah,
stuff, you know what I mean? Like bags and da 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 da. But like these are the things that I think about as most important, which is it's kind of funny because it was earlier in my career.
yeah, I love that. That was me with the coat. It was like a conscious thought. Like I want that and I'm gonna go to work thinking about it. Plus it's freezing in Chicago. So I
Plus
still
it's
have that.
freezing.
I still have that jacket now in California and I can't get rid of it.
It's like sentimental value. Okay, I feel
Yeah.
that. Would you say, and not, I don't want to go too personal in terms of it, but what are some of the things that kept you in sales? Now, of course, the cash, which you know we all understand, the upside is huge. So I think that's without to be said. But I'm curious to know, you know, what has kept you in sales for this amount of time?
Yeah. So for me being in media sales, it's really what I'm interested in. I love the advertising side, the creative and like strategy of it all. But also, I feel like I become a mini expert in all these different businesses because part of my discovery call is to understand how they get a return on investment. What are their struggles? What are their pain points? How did their business start? Where did they see it going? And in doing so, I really start to learn a lot about the different industries, the owners, the brands, everybody. And that's, I think, what has kept me in it.
Mhm.
Uh, I just, it's cool. Like I'll tell people about like up and coming cosmetic treatments or a new car that's going to be released. They're like, how do you know all of this random stuff? I'm like, well, I had 6 meetings this week.
Right,
So
right, right.
yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's it's kind of interesting because I mean, you are an expert, like, I mean, if you know anything, or if you're in an industry for long enough and you kind of know the ins and the outs of it, then you become an expert. And certainly within sales, I mean, you become a master seller. I mean, anyone that's doing anything for 10 plus years and has had the amount of success that you've had over time across a wide variety of organizations. I mean, like, salespeople who aren't good generally, within my experience, don't actually stay that long because it's really hard, especially new business sales. I mean, it's brutal. I read a recent statistic, I think it was from outreach.com. They said that the average person who just does like prospecting only lasts like 18 months. The average AE, or normal sales executive, lasts about 5 months. And so, there's only a small percentage of folks that end up enterprise sales directors, or, folks at our level, I would say.
That's crazy to think about. But I
Yeah.
guess it does make sense because the people that I've been with throughout my career, I could count on two hands for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it wears on people. You know what I mean? It wears on people. I mean, the only reason why I don't have grays on this beard right now, and I don't dye it, but is I got to meditate. I have to train 5 days a week. My diet has to be good. I do Freshly now to ensure, like, the food is good. I mean, I do so much stuff just to maintain the mind and the body so that I don't get too stressed out, because I have to, counteract the stress and anxiety, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually, now we go into that. I am curious. I mean, what are some of the things that you do to manage the stress?
Yeah. So I walk away. That's like my number one thing when it's just getting to be too much. I have a yellow lab, and I'll, like, if I got that email that's just ticking me off, or an internal issue, I'll literally be like, let's go for a walk. And I just set it aside. Kind of came up with this thing. It's called the side phone. So people who are my friends or my boyfriend knows, like, if I look at my phone and I literally like put it out of reach, it means something I just read was like stressing me out. I side phone like that situation for the time being. So I
Okay.
phone or walk away. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I like that. Oh, I might take that with you. Just side phone it, take a step back, breathe. I like that. That's a good one.
I mean, it doesn't hurt that I live in Southern California and I go sit at the beach for a second, but get outside. That's like probably my off the device for, even if you can just do 5 minutes. Yeah. So I'll go throw the ball for my dog, or take her for a quick jaunt around the block, or even just get in my car and, like, instead of door dashing lunch, I'll like force myself, go pick up lunch because you need to get out of the house. And that's a big one.
That's good. Okay. Yeah, the stress is a big thing. I mean, everyone kind of handles it differently. I mean, you've been in sales for a while, and, we have a lot of folks that deal with things in a good way, in a positive way, and then folks that maybe don't do it as positive as they could. So it could be tough. I
mean, I'm not going to lie, a glass of wine after a really rough day probably will take precedence for the walk sometimes, but
I get it. I do a dry month every 2 months. So I have green light for 2 months, and then I take a full month off of those substances, of drinking and whatnot, just to kind of, like, clean up my body. But I totally get it. I mean, between training and everything, it's all super required. All right. I did have questions. So I haven't, within my experience, there hasn't been a ton of ladies that I've encountered that do new business sales. There's been a lot of account managers and folks in different roles. But I haven't seen or encountered tons of ladies in the role. Maybe, like, if I had to guess, 5%, 8% maybe. And so I was curious to know, as a woman being in sales for a long time, I'm curious to get your take on why do you think that is? And then the follow-up would be, is how do you think we could recruit and help and encourage more ladies to get into sales, new business sales in particular?
Yeah, I think one, new business sales, it is tough. And, historically, your C-suite, the people that you were sitting down with were older men. So one came kind of the intimidation factor, which might make people hesitant. And then the other is, is it just because I might be a pretty face, or just because they want a female? And then it kind of makes you not think of yourself really as a professional anymore, which, early on in my career, there were jokes like, if a girl showed up dressed a certain way to the office, she must have a call with so-and-so today. So, like, that stigma, I think, made a lot of women want to move out of the industry, because that's not any, like, label that you want put on yourself. But luckily we're in a place now where that's not the norm anymore. And it really isn't the way that people look at things. But I think it is, it can be tough, especially because women are supposed to be quiet and patient and, have kind of like that more like comforting side. And there is an aspect of sales where you do have to negotiate. You do have to push back a little bit.
That's right.
And I hate to say that that's not something women can do or want to do. I'm just saying it's not usually how we grow up. So I think it's going to change in the next few years drastically. But I know, most of my female friends that are in the industry, they're on the other side. They're the managers or the buyers.
Yeah, exactly.
Sellers. Yeah. So I really think it's just not realizing that we can also be in it because we're powerful and we can lead the conversation and not just because they want to have a girl sell to them. Yeah.
I've seen, I mean, it's kind of interesting because most of the women that I have worked with in new business sales, they're like really good, like they're like elite salespeople. They're not just like kind of like, okay, like they are usually excellent. In fact, I mean, probably, I mean, if I think about the top 5 best sellers that I've ever like worked with, at least 2 of them, if not 3, were women, are women, excuse me. And so, I mean, when I think about it, the only reason when I bring it up is because when I first started with sales, I mean, there was almost none. There was very few, like, 1 out of 40 or 50. Now there's a few, we've seen more. But I just think that, women bring a different angle and they have different, everyone has different skill sets. And so I just would love to know, like, if there was ways, or how would you recommend that maybe we could, encourage more folks to at least test it out? Because I do believe in particular, women can bring so much to the table, especially within new business sales, because it is, it's mostly guys in it, typically guys with high testosterone, if we're being honest.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's crazy is I feel like the reason most women don't want to go into sales would be their superpower, because we don't come off as pushy and we don't have that ability to like, change the conversation. Well, having that like comforting aura to you is going to make someone want to talk to you, and is going to make that sale feel like a consultant, not like you're pushing them. So yeah, people, I mean, women are just easier to talk to usually, they are better at listening usually. So use those skills and don't look at them as a weakness, I think is a big part. And also the fact that you need to have different insight into whatever it is that you're selling or the company that you're talking to. And a woman is going to approach and look at something different than a man would.
Yeah. Maybe it's just also, I think it's just more of, even us just like more talking about it. I think with the podcast, I love when ladies are on it because they bring a different perspective and insight, and just getting it out there, letting people know about the lifestyle, and you can bring a lot of value to it. I think even you just being on and being able to, and once we promote this, I think would, just be a lot of value. And if it can convert 1 or 2 or 3 ladies into considering it, I think it would be good. Because once you get over that hump, once you get over that first few years of sales and things start to crank, it's very difficult to get out of it, I would say, things, because it provides such a great lifestyle.
If I had a quarter for every time I put my head on my keyboard and was like, I don't want to do this anymore, and then I'm still doing it.
It's tough. It's tough, but it's reward. You know what I mean? It's tough, but it's rewarding generally, I think. But there is that there's the middle area, and then there's the other area. Now that we're going, so this is a section we're starting to wrap up the conversation, which the time just flew by, but that usually happens when it's a good convo. Is power questions. So power questions is the section where it's kind of rapid fire. It's going to be about maybe 5 questions or so, just to get a little bit of an understanding as to kind of how you tick. And so the idea, Alison, is you can't think too much about these questions. All right, you just have to kind of like just go for it. All right, you ready?
Ready.
All right, cool. So number 1, how many hours of sleep do you get?
6 to 8.
6 to 8. Okay. What is your favorite food?
Pizza.
Favorite activity to unwind?
Snowboarding or hiking. I guess one's seasonal.
All right. That's fair. What are you reading or listening to?
I'm reading the Crawdads book, the new one. I literally just got on page 4. Where the Crawdads sing.
And tell me, where is your favorite beach?
Newport.
Yes, it's a nice beach.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. Well, that's pretty much it for, the Cheat Code Quarters episode with Alison Posada. I am so thankful for you to be swinging by. I'm really happy. Like, I thought this conversation was fantastic. If some folks wanted to reach out to you just to ask you some questions, or, just to kind of get your take on a few things, what would be the best way for someone to reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is perfect. So Allison Lorraine Posada is how you find me, or Cohen is my maiden name. But yeah, LinkedIn is a great way to get in touch with me.
All right, sweet. Thank you so much. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Thanks. Well, that was Alison Posada's episode. Hopefully, you guys liked it. There was a bunch of things that she mentioned, but the three core cheat codes that I thought were important is number one, the importance of giving a client an out early. So just mentioning when you're having a conversation with a client or an internal stakeholder, like, hey, if things don't go our way, or if there's not a good fit, we can just move on. I think that's a good tactic to make people feel comfortable, break the ice, and kind of keep things moving in a very like amicable way. The second thing that she mentioned, which you really can't hone in on the importance of this, is better understanding your clients and the interest that they have outside of work. So if there's things that your client is posting, maybe they've written a blog post or an article, maybe they're featured in some type of interview. Read that, mention it. If their sports team is in the playoffs, people are people regardless. And taking an interest in your clients or prospects' well-being and stuff outside of work can help differentiate you, and you can learn about them, and maybe even make a friend. The last thing, which I really loved, and I need to do myself, is she mentioned, hey, listen, when something jarring happens, when you get a bad email, when you lose a deal, when a project isn't working, when you're frustrated, all these types of things happen at work or even outside of work. And when a moment like that happens, she mentioned, put down the device, take a moment, close the laptop, go for a walk, take a breath, a breather. I don't know. I think something about just taking care of your mental health and how you're feeling and being mindful of that when it happens, I think that's really powerful. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Till the next time.